In the next 5 to 10 years, I see myself being an elementary educator or in special education. We First, I'm going to give you this quote by Alan Klein, which reads, "Children might remind us to treasure the smallest gifts, even in the most difficult times." And I believe that is so true. We are going to first talk about socioeconomic status and how that will affect my future career. Then we are going to glide through some cultural differences and how that could possibly affect going into the field I am choosing. And then we are going to look at some conflicts that may occur between my students, between me and parents, and between different aspects of the education field. Education.com says that the socioeconomic status is a measure of the influence that the social behavior has individual, family, communities, and schools. There are 4 different aspects to socioeconomic status, and it is conditional, it is imposed on people, it composes, and it's based off economics. Now, Mrs. Harvey is a teacher in Lexington, Nebraska in the 1st grade, and I did an email interview with her. She said that she notices the most problems with her low economic status students, whether the parents who work really late and so they can't help their children at night with their studies, whether it be parents who choose not to help at all, or whether it be kids who go to the after-school program. She says that there aren't so many differences between the highs and the lows, just the main fact that the higher economic students, their parents will take the time and have the time to spend with them to work on studies, which is really important, especially in the elementary age when you are learning the basics that will help you throughout life. And to go with that, To go with that, socioeconomic status could really mean something different for each culture, which is what we're going to get into next. Greatschools.org is a great website, and it explained a lot about how in different cultures the verbal and nonverbal justices are so different that some teachers don't know how to handle that. What I mean by that is different cultures speak to someone differently. They have different eye contact rules, they have different spatial rules by standing in front of someone, and they have different facial expression rules. And overall, it's just different. And sometimes you, as a teacher, you will have to adjust to what your student's culture is, even though that may not be what your culture is, but you still need to learn to accept it. Mrs. Harvey really focused on holiday celebrations. Because she comes from such a diverse classroom, and I grew up in a diverse classroom, I totally understand where she's coming from. She said that if you're going to have a holiday thing, that's fine, but you need to make it very generic. You need to make it so you don't offend anyone, and that would be great. Now, also, she explained that when you're reading, you can't assume anyone knows big words. You can't assume they know these words because they might not be used in their home, they might not be used in their culture. So you really have to take a step back and use different words for everything. You have to think of ways to make it really intelligent, and you have to think of ways to make it seem really not so intelligent, even when you know that most of your kids should know what this means. You can't ever assume that. Lastly, we are going to talk about conflict and how I will have to deal with that in my future career. As I was reading greatschools.org, it was talking about different conflicts between a little Asian girl and her teacher, because the Asians grow up learning different things, and this teacher didn't know that, so there was conflict between them. There was also a story about conflict with a little African American boy who didn't really understand why he needed to be in school. Harvey explains that she has had disrespect towards her as being a woman in the head of the classroom from different parents, and she's also seen conflict amongst her students because of their cultural differences. Now, being in such a diverse community, I can see where she's coming from. I know that conflict is something that I will constantly have to deal with in my future because our society just keeps growing. And that's not a bad thing. I will deal with the conflict that I have to deal with because I cannot wait to become a teacher. Conflict is just something small compared to the great smiles and the great rewards you get from teaching these children. Now, we talked about different socioeconomic statuses, we glided through some different cultural differences, and we ended with conflicts that I may have to deal with in my future. But don't ever forget what Alan Klein once said, and that was, children remind us to treasure the smallest gifts, even in the most difficult times.